AMR is like a COVID-19 pandemic nearly every year. Statistics show us that AMR kills 700,000 people globally in just the last year. And by 2050, it could kill as many as 20 million annually. Unlike COVID-19, this isn't a surprise. Public health experts, industry participants all recognize this, that antimicrobials are really like the mortar holding the building of healthcare together. And without effective antibiotics, even basic routine procedures like root canals or treatment with cancer care cannot function properly.
The CDC estimates that each year, more than 2.8 million antimicrobial resistant infections occur in the U.S., and more than 35,000 Americans die with these infections. Truly, AMR is a slow, silent pandemic that has been smoldering, but recently igniting globally. Antimicrobial resistance, I do believe, is the existential threat of this century.
We have too few products that are in development to meet both current needs and the future needs that we know are on the horizon. And while we didn't know COVID was coming, we know antibiotic resistance is not only coming, it's here. And so we have no excuse not to be prepared. We must take urgent action to increase the pipeline.
But literally not a day went by that I did not have a child struggling for survival in a life and death battle with a resistant organism, mostly bacteria, but sometimes even resistant fungi. Resistant microbes killed my patients, our nation's children.
And so this lady in the prime of her life who had beaten cancer ended up dying from the drug-resistant infections.
So as a physician, it is heartbreaking to know exactly what the infection is that's causing a problem, and yet have to tell a patient and their family that we really don't have an effective treatment for it.
I was a professional athlete. At the time, I'm 6'2", about 310 pounds, in the best shape of my life. The elite of the elite, really, in that world. And I had been floored by something that I'd never heard of, and didn't even know what it was. AMR isn't going away, right? It's been here. And the bug will keep evolving, right? So we've got to stay in front of this, and we've let it get ahead, and we've got to continue to catch up and then get in front.
We see AMR as one of the most pressing public health crises the world is facing. In the long term, it has the potential to cause even greater mortality and economic damage than COVID-19 if we don't address it. This is a powerful example of how the pharmaceutical industry can come together to make a huge difference for patients and society.
But collaboration also is extremely important, because in the complexity of the scientific realities of today and the way that the science has proliferated and diversified, in order to be able to harness this diversity, we need to collaborate. I believe that right now there is no one that can alone be able to address the issues as effective as if they partner with others.
The fund will also provide technical support to emerging companies, giving them access to deep expertise and resources of large biopharmaceutical companies to strengthen and accelerate the development of novel antimicrobial medicines. It's important to note that the fund is highly collaborative, involving a broad range of biopharmaceutical companies, philanthropies, development banks, and multilateral organizations.
This is bold, it's pretty gutsy, potentially transformational, but this kind of effort is absolutely essential. I do think this partnership represents, in my mind, the best of corporate responsibility. The money is impressive, and we all know that. It takes a lot of money to get this done. But money alone can't buy the intellectual commitment and intellectual resources and history of innovation that this partnership represents. The U.S. government cannot do this alone. We cannot get there from here without public-private partnerships such as this one.
It's not just one antibiotic or even the 2 to 4 that are coming with this really great new public-private partnership, but it's a robust and renewable pipeline that goes on to combat the resistant problems we know about and those that we might not know about that are coming.
The circumstance we find ourselves in almost guarantees that we're going to think much differently about infectious disease and the capacities to develop therapeutics against dangerous pathogens, I think, going forward. Going forward, the capacity to develop antibiotics to infectious agents, I think, is going to be seen as a matter of national security. So creating more investment opportunities for therapeutic advances in this space, I think, is going to require us, as the senators talked about, to rethink the R&D model in this space. And today's announcement, in my view, is a big step forward. Ultimately, we need to change the reimbursement model.
Unless the macro environment changes, the players such as Xbiotics, of which there are about 200, as Kevin correctly stated, will not be able to thrive and survive.
The timing of this AMR Action Fund is life-saving to these research companies, and actually it's life-saving to the world to keep this research going forward. And so we should really take a moment to recognize and thank the leadership exhibited today by these CEOs, these companies. No one forced them to come here today with $1 billion for this important mission, and so I'm grateful that they have. But let me be very blunt. Unless the US government changes antibiotic reimbursement, today's excitement will end in bankruptcy. So the AMR Action Fund is a $1 billion down payment. I'm grateful. They have bought us valuable time, a little bit of breathing room to get reimbursement fixed. But unless the US government takes the next steps with the antibiotic pool incentive legislation, patients won't get the cures they need. COVID-19 has taught us some really hard lessons about the value of preparedness.
Obviously, we're particularly excited about today's announcement because of the desperate need of our patients, as I described. But I want to echo what people have been saying and to say very clearly, this must be just an important first step. We need models to assure the economic viability of drugs once they are approved.
Today's announcement of the AMR Action Fund is a truly important step forward in continuing to ensure a strong pipeline of new antibiotics. Congress has taken some steps to address antibiotic resistance, but we need to do a lot more. What we really need to think about next is how to create a stable marketplace for these antibiotics once they are approved.
What we do in our bill is attempt to address the market incentives. It may not be the only answer as to how we develop and pay for these drugs, keeping companies from going bankrupt along the way. But we think if you add it to that which is already being done, it is a significant step forward.
But it's clear we need to do more. And I think it's not just more, but we need to do different. And I am confident your new partnership will do both.
AMR is a predictable and preventable crisis, and it's a problem that we can no longer afford to ignore. With the AMR Action Fund, industry is taking action now to sustain the fragile antibiotic pipeline, which we heard from the last panel is close to collapse. But the fund is just a temporary and time-limited bridge that will only work if key governments, including the US, make the necessary reforms to create a sustainable market.